I am a huge fan of conferences. I feel as though conference in the marine science and conservation industry or field, whatever you'd like to call it, is an important aspect to collaboration, to finding out what other people are doing, interacting with those scientists and conservationists, because a lot of the times when we read each other's journal articles or we read like white papers or documents, we never really get to interact. And conferences are a way to interact, whether in person or virtual these days, to be able to get to know one another and to be able to understand where people are coming from, how they're getting involved. And so it's great when I get to not only promote, but also follow up on conferences. And if you remember correctly, if you've been listening to this episode in the last couple of months or this podcast in the last couple of months, you know that I've talked about an Upwell conference that is really about voices that are not traditionally heard in conservation in general, not just at conferences, but in general. And so I'm excited today last time I presented, or I had Angelo Villagomez and Anupa Asokan on the podcast to talk about the Upwell conference and what they're looking forward to doing and promoting that conference. Today, we have two people on who are going to talk about what happened at that conference and why it was so important to have that first ever Upwell conference. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening in the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean. And today we're going to be talking about speaking up for the ocean, and not just speaking up for the ocean and how we do that, but also who gets to do that. Who gets to not only speak up, but also be heard? Because there are a lot of people around the world who need to speak up, who want to speak up for the ocean, but are not always heard and are not always included in those conversations of the decision making in and around those types of conversations, or in and around those types of important projects or calls to action. And I think it's really important that we get involved, because if you think about it, most of the people on this planet live along the coastline. Over 60% of the people in the world live along a coastline. Not always white middle-aged men that live along these coastlines. And it's important to know that there are other people from other cultures, from other backgrounds, from other genders that also represent the needs and requirements to live by the ocean and to live off the ocean and to be a part of that conversation to say what happens to that ocean and how we can protect it and better manage it. Unfortunately, though, in a lot of settings where decisions are made or policies are made, those voices aren't heard. And so Upwell was a conference that was created to allow those voices to be heard to each other, talk about, the feelings around how they're not heard, why they're not heard, and sort of the I guess the situations that a lot of the people that are at this conference talk about in terms of what they go through when they are in a position to be at the table or in a position to be heard. And sometimes it's not always a positive experience. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's not always a positive experience. So what I wanted to do is talk to people who were at the conference, who helped not were only at the conference, but helped organize the conference. And so we have Marce Gutiérrez-Graudiņš, who is the Executive Director at Azul, which is one of the organizers of the conference, and Katso, who is part of the Center of American Progress, who is also at the conference and one of the organizers. They tell us about the conference, how it went, what they got out of it, and what they hope to get in the future, and how to build on this conference. Also, some of the things that I feel like are important that we'll talk about after this interview to go forward, and just in general day-to-day activities within the science, the ocean science and marine conservation field. So we're going to talk about that after this interview with Marce and Kat. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Marce and Kat, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about the Upwell conference?
Listas.
Yeah.
Ready?
Right on. I am so excited because this is an episode that I've been waiting to do since we covered Upwell in the first episode that we did back right before Oceans Day and Oceans Week. We had Angelo Villagomez and Anupa on the podcast talking about Upwell and talking about conversations that are not normally put out into the world. And it was a really great and refreshing feel to hear this type of conference that was put together. And so we talked a lot about the anticipation, what we wanted to expect, and what they expected, and what they were going to cover. And there was 3 panels, and then there was just all that was going to be on YouTube and live and everything like that. And so when Angelo said, "Hey, the conference is done and we're ready to talk about it," I'm like, "Perfect, let's have people on." And I'm so excited to have the both of you on to be able to go over, what you expected, and then what you found from what the results were from the conference, and what's going to happen after this, and where we're going to go from there. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, can you ladies both tell me who you are and what you do?
All right. Hello, my name is Marce Gutiérrez-Graudiņš. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Azul. Azul is an environmental justice organization working with Latinx communities on ocean and coastal conservation.
Very nice. Very nice. And Kat?
Hi, thank you for having us. My name is Kat So. I'm a research associate at the Center for American Progress. I work closely with Angelo Villagomez, who you had on a previous episode, and I work on conservation and fossil fuel accountability work.
I love how, conservation has really, diversified in terms of what we can cover and what needs to be covered. And there's organizations out there to cover specific things. And ocean justice has been a very hot topic over, I would say over the last 5 years, and people really starting to talk about it. Maybe not in the mainstream media, but definitely in the conservation space, we've seen a lot of that. And so, Marce, can you tell us, why you started this organization?
I comes from the fishing industry. I'd like to say that I used to sell fish and now I save them. I started in the conservation industry about 15 years ago exactly, because of what I saw in fishing, basically overfishing and pollution, etc. And I had no idea of anything in terms of how the nonprofit system worked. I had no idea about issues of equity or diversity or anything like that. And I started working in this field in Southern California. And there was this really big public process which was meant to be representative of all of the Californian people, and there was a work group with 64 people on it, and I was like the only Spanish speaker on it in a place that was encompassing Los Angeles and San Diego, etc. And that was a really big wake-up call for me. And that's how I started looking into things, and I really wanted to do this work and be able to focus on working in community with my community. And that's where I started. I moved to San Francisco, packed up my stuff, and had no idea what I was getting into. But here we are, 12 years later.
12 years later. And so can you kind of give us an idea of some of the projects that you've worked on, like just briefly, so people can get an idea? I'm going to put the links to Azul so people can get more in depth, but just give us an idea of what a project for ocean justice really encompasses.
At the time, it was not called Ocean Justice. It was just called, hey, let's get everybody involved and let's talk to everybody, right? Doing things like making sure that public materials are translated not just to one language, to various languages, to languages depending on each county, etc., to making sure that we're talking to everybody, making sure that we're talking not just to the usual suspects. And from there, I think the really big turning point for us was in California. And at the beginning, we were very California-centric. There was this effort in California to ban single-use plastic bags. And they had been trying to do it for a while. And, things come to a head. This is 2012, 2013. And the conversation is, we should do this. And then the plastic people and other folks started saying, oh, no, but like people of color and communities of color don't know how to use reusable bags. Latinos don't know how to use reusable bags. And I'm like, this is where I curse. In Spanish usually. And I'm like, my grandmother's been using a reusable bag forever, for generations. And so I go and I grab my bag and we create this whole campaign around it. We pay someone to create the artwork, which by the way, at the time was like a lot of money for me, right? And we create this thing, which was like $300, something like that. And, that was like rent for me at the time, I think. And we we put it out there. But what it was this grandmother bag, what we call in Spanish, bolsas abuelita, these reusable bags that my grandmother, everybody had before. And I bring my bag and I literally turn into the bag lady in California. And so I'm showing up to like all the meetings and all the like presentations and all the testimony with my bag. And what happens is that at this time, the legislature in California has and it's still growing, right? A very large Latino caucus. And so they were all like, oh, wait, hold on. My grandma had that. Oh, my mother had that. Oh, and so like it turned the conversation on a dime. People that didn't want to talk to us are now giving presentations with a bag.
Huh.
They're doing like, it was this like, oh, because it was this idea that like being an environmentalist had like, well, no, that's for like people that work, that drive a hybrid and
Yeah.
and shop at the at the fancy organic stores. Like, no, this is common sense. And so that was really the big, and it's that's not something that's just obviously relative to Latinx culture, right? It's
Right.
Many other cultures, but this is
Right.
where we were working in. And so that was like really our big sort of like splash that we made. And yes, California ended up banning the single-use plastic bag. Then the plastic people came and spent a lot of money to put a ballot initiative, and then we defeated that as well. But that was really where that conversation came from, and we've been building up on really just highlighting and celebrating those legacies of leadership ever since.
I love that kind of story, because a lot of times you don't think about what, there's a lot of people making assumptions about groups of people who technically don't have a voice at the meetings. And here you are, you see that and you're like, well, hold on a second here. Like, there are people who, like you said, this is a cultural thing for people in California who are of a Latin background, and they do it all the time. So we should go to the meetings and show them that we do it all the time. And that can change the movement of a policy. And I think it always flabbergasts me like how people can try and get around just with messaging and making those assumptions, and it drives me nuts I'm a white guy, middle-aged white guy, and I can just imagine what it does to a lot of people who don't normally have those voices. And so one, I thank you for not only doing that, but like starting Azul and doing all these other projects that you've been able to do. I think it's a wonderful, and it's definitely needed, definitely brings awareness to everything that goes on, and not only to this conference, but also just into the world. And people need to know more about this, because it doesn't get talked enough, I believe. And so I think it's great that people are doing that. Now, Kat, you've worked with the Center of American Progress for a little bit, and how did you get involved in like, was ocean justice sort of a relatively new thing when you started to work at CAP, or is this something that you've been feeling for a while, or have similar stories?
Yeah, I've been at CAP for 4 years now. It's just hit my 4-year anniversary.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I came to CAP right out of college, studied environmental studies, policy, marine studies. So it was very like one-to-one. I started at CAP as an assistant and slowly just started getting my feet into more projects. And one of the first projects that I worked on with the CAP Energy and Environment Department was the Equitable and Just National Climate Forum, which the Ocean Justice Forum that I now am the project coordinator of was kind of modeled after those successes. So the EJ Forum was created to really bridge the gap between national environmental groups that are, DC based, very large, huge reach, and communities and advocates who have been doing this work for forever, for such a long time. But then there wasn't one place where everyone could come together. We could address harms, see what the policies were actually needed, and what we could advocate for together as a group, rather than, the national groups just going in and just steamrolling everything, thinking that they know better, which we know is not the case.
True.
So that was one of the first projects that I worked on, and I absolutely loved it. And when Azul and Urban Ocean Lab and Gulf Coast, now Taproot, and CAP came together, and we proposed this this new forum based off of something that we knew worked. You have to make some changes for different communities and different policy sectors, but I was really excited to be able to get to jump in with this, and the rest is here. Like, this is how Upwell came together and why I'm continuing in this work. It's been great so far.
Well, that's amazing. That's awesome. I love that story. And it kind of brings me also to sort of like, you have this EJ forum that this environmental justice forum that's come together and talking about these types of roles and these types of projects. Now, how did Upwell specifically get, sort of, where was the inspiration behind Upwell? Marce, maybe you can.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to be as diplomatic as possible, but I'll give you the actual skinny. So,
gotcha.
Like I said, I've been doing this work for 12 years. The first time I showed up in DC was 15 years ago for like a national ocean conference. I don't even remember what it was. And with Azul, I started, and it's really like, like ingrained in my mind. 7 years ago at this big conference in DC, there was a conversation, and it was like probably one of the first conversations of its kind, that was talking about what can people of color bring to the ocean movement, i.e., what can the people of color, dance or sing for their supper that we can then be nice enough to include them. And it was an interesting conversation. I was part of that, so thankful for that. And in my mind, I just remember like, what is stuck in my mind is the collective gasp of the room when I was talking. I just remember people being, and I went back and saw it the other day. It's not that bad. I was extremely polite.
Right.
But, that was something that was stuck in my mind of like how these conversations are held. And so what happened is we have this thing called the Azul Rising Leaders Forum. And we've always wanted to make sure that we're not the only ones in the room, that we're talking to other people, that we're bringing more people together. Anyways, so we're going to bring all these folks, fabulous emerging leaders from all over the country. And this is, for some of them, this is their first time in DC. For some of them, it's the first time at an ocean kind of like events, etc. And I kept thinking about like, where are we going to go with them that is going to be as Angelo says, affirming and validating. And there wasn't enough. There just wasn't enough content. And this is where we came up with the idea. I will say people were very reticent to sign on, and it took a while to like sign some, I won't say whom, to convince people, because it was like, happening in the midst of other events happening and many other things happening. And it wasn't, it was like, okay, let's have more things and more how do you say that word in English? Propositive, and more ideas and more content and more forums. Yeah. And that's where that came from. But it was hard just because like starting something from scratch is hard. Like, are we sure that we're going to, we had doubts. Like, are we sure that we're going to have enough people? Are we sure that we're like, and we're still figuring out. There's still a lot of sticky subjects that we're trying to like work through. And it is always interesting when you come up with something like that. For us, we always knew that it was going to be interesting and it was going to be like full capacity. So I'm very excited. I think that, it's in how you do things. The how is as important as the why. And that's where we're learning. And that's where we're, because some of us are very small organizations, some of them are more, established, et cetera. So we're still having to operate within the context of like, the usual status quo and how things are done. And so it's really interesting, but I think I think it was fabulous. I think it was, even more exciting that CAP was able to host us and kind of provide that focus and that spotlight on something like this. Yeah. So I'm very excited, and I think, we had so much interest, and it's going to be, I'm very pragmatic. I'm also very optimistic, but I think it can grow really big, but it's going to come down to the details and how we do this the right way.
Yeah. And like, as you said, it's the first time doing it. and it's a big deal to do it. Not just because of the content, but also just to gather this many people around and put put them all in a similar spot, and making sure everybody has the same voice and everybody feels comfortable, and just the logistics of a conference is. I know people who plan conferences, and it's insane, but I want to thank you for all of you for doing this. I think it's needed. It's definitely a necessity. I almost want to say it's unfortunate that it has to be in a separate, as its own conference and not part of other conferences in the future. But I like this. like the aspect that it's focused on one thing, right? And it's focused on hearing voices and learning from people and their experiences. And I think that I was just recording another podcast just before this. And, we talked about the humanizing conservation and how important it is to hear people's experiences, good and bad, challenges and successes. And I think I like that. I like that aspect. And I want to thank all of you for everybody who was involved for putting that on, because it's just a great experience, I think. And I think it'll just build and get bigger and get, and you'll just learn, like you said, you'll learn from it, and then how to go in different areas, and maybe if it's the idea is to make it bigger, keep it the same. But I think it's a great idea to have this and to hear those voices. As someone likes to hear stories, that's something that I think is greatly needed. So I guess I want to talk to both of you. I want to hear from both of you. So we know you had the inspiration, but what was your expectations when you, as you're planning this and as you're attending this, the first couple of, a couple of days beforehand? Kat, maybe we'll start with you on this one. What were your expectations of the conversations that were going to be had, and maybe some of the results that you were hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, so my role in the Upwell conference at large was basically project managing the event side of things with our lovely CAP events team, and they're wonderful, and they made the space amazing and did all the tech, and it was just very high production value, and I cannot say enough good things about them. But as the kind of manager of the event side, I was like, oh my goodness, it's happening. We've decided that we were going to do this 2 months ago, and we are doing it now, and it is happening. So there was a lot of anxiety leading up to that, just generally, but all in all, I'm so happy with the way that it turned out.
Nice.
And the panels were incredible. We did something where we had from Urban Ocean Lab, CAP, and Azul, we had 3 principals who were involved in the planning. So Marce, Angelo, and Jean from Urban Ocean Lab, Jean Flemma, lovely person. And they were responsible for, each one was responsible for one panel. So that also was so interesting to see how Marce, Angelo, and Jean went about finding the people to be on their panels and asking people from their different experiences, whether that be in the past 5 years, past 10 years, just people they've met. So that was so interesting and so different from any other conference that I've really been a part of in the big DC scene, where it's you kind of see the same faces over and over again. You're okay, I know what this person's gonna say. I know about them. I know their background already. What else you got? I want to see a full range of people in the ocean world. And so that was a really cool thing that I really liked about the way that we set up the panels according to the themes. And yeah, I think it went a lot better than I expected, but all events that I have ever planned go better than I expect. Also a pessimist.
That's good.
There were no snags. Everything went well, from the technical side. I had so many people coming up to me after the events and during and at other events during Ocean Week, just being that was so great to be a part of. I'm sorry I missed it, or I watched it online, or are you doing it next year? And all these things. There were notably so many really cool young people, and some of them were part of Azul's Rising Leader Initiative that I got to meet and talk with. And then there were just
nice.
other youths around from
Yeah.
different organizations. You know, the Ocean Project had some folks, and like Earth Echo, and it was just really inspiring, and just like made me so happy to see all these young people engaged in policy at this level, and being able to like see themselves on the stage, and like even myself, like to see myself on the stage, which is
Yeah.
not a huge thing that happens all the time in DC,
Right.
unfortunately still. But
Yeah.
it was really cool, and
Mhm.
I empathize with those in the crowd, and just people being really excited about hearing folks talk. So I had a great time. I don't know,
Awesome.
Marce, do you want
Awesome.
to add to that at all?
Yeah, Marcel, why don't you add like what your sort of expectations were, and then sort of some of the things that you were hoping to get out of it.
I will say, and not to sound glib, but I knew it was going to be like go really well. The reason why, no, listen,
I
the
like
reason
that.
why is because for a couple of years now, we have been kind of like, and it very important to say, by the way, by the time that people have to create a space of this kind, there's so much work that has gone into trying to create that focus within
Mm-hmm.
the existing structures. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is no easy feat like, hey, let's start from scratch. Let's do this whole thing. Like, it is a lot of work. So all of us have at this point been doing work, you know, be it media, be it like existing partnership, et cetera, to try to, you know, get more voices into this. So we've done that before in other things, and you know, we had this thing in California where you know, we had Ocean Day, which was like our annual advocacy day, and we created again a space within it, Latinos Veninos, and we started with zero, like with you know myself, and then
Mm-hmm.
7 people, and then like 3 years later we had 100 people
Wow.
of like Latinos that were coming to Sacramento. So like the
Huge
thing
growth.
is like yes, like we have seen this over and over, and then what happens is that the establishment says like, oh, that sounds really exciting. I want to be part of that. So we've done that a couple of times, and you know you have to kind of take obviously like you know informed risks and choices and stuff like that. Thankfully, you know, we have the support of partners to do this,
Yeah.
but yeah, we were ready to kind of have it in a you know in a hotel ballroom or whatever we had to, because something that we felt very strongly about, and
Yeah.
like I said, people sometimes have to be convinced, but I'm very excited that we were able to do it together.
We kind of mentioned it before that this conference was sort of held during what has become what I think is called Capitol Hill Oceans Week, a CHOW. It's during World Oceans Month. It's over Oceans Day. It's a fairly big thing. A lot of times it's focused on the actual conference is focused on U.S. government, and sort of a lot of announcements are made, and a lot of other events happen around that week. So can you just tell us sort of how this new symposium like fostered a space for like BIPOC folks to like working in ocean conservation, to be seen and their experiences to be elevated in a way?
Um, I think it's very important for Kat to give you another part of that, because like I said, I've been here for 15 years, so I have very strong ideas. But first of all, it's very important that we had a lineup of all people of color. Okay, so
Right.
like you barely see some people
Yeah.
on this. Even this year, we had some others, like I said, other events where you had all white lineups talking about indigenous this and indigenous. So it's this
Mm-hmm.
really like almost comical thing sometimes. And I think that what we need to move towards is more, right? And so like they can't just be one Upwell. Like maybe there's Upwell, maybe there's this other thing that somebody else creates, maybe there's this other thing. So like we need to move towards more, because the fact is that there's so much interest in this. There's so many people that are like want to see themselves there, that can see
Yeah.
reflect themselves there. Like I have a list of like 300 people, experts, like ocean experts of color, that I've been, creating for years, trying to put this together. So like there's so many people we could like, at the beginning are like, oh, are we going to have enough folks? Yes, of course. There's so many of us that
Yeah.
could be out there. And so what we need is more, right? And like, you start that conversation, and sometimes it's a little bit awkward the first time around, but like, you just got to take that step and go forward. And, maybe you shared your lessons learned, your lessons not learned, what did work, what
Yeah.
didn't work. But what we need is more. We need more and more
Yeah.
people and more spaces and more events and, all of the above.
Right. And Kat, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, same as Marce. Like, I loved like just having all these people in one space. And I think again, what I was saying earlier, that like there's so many conferences and DC events that are a lot of like white people, and some of it is almost like, did you look hard enough? Did you ask around? Did you try? Because there are so many qualified people, and like what qualified means is also very different for a person of color versus a white person, or what is seen as, I would say. But there are so many amazing people in this field that just simply wouldn't get asked to talk about X, Y, and Z because they hadn't been asked before, or it's not on the top of mind of somebody who is organizing this event, which like establishment may also not be a person of color. So there's a cycle that I think needs to be broken in that way. But also at the same time can't just be like transactional and ticking a box and being like, got it, like got our one panel of color, like done. I think it very much needs to be like a core tenet in the way that conferences and speaker lineups and the conversations happen around ocean policy. And like, if you don't represent a significant portion of the population, then you're never going to get all the community buy-in, you're not going to tap into a resource that is existing of young people really wanting to do this work and being so interested, but then getting disillusioned because of these barriers that just exist and haven't been broken yet. So I personally, I love just, testing the waters. I love like pushing the boundaries and seeing, that's, I think my youth, because I haven't been that jaded yet. But I really.
Hey, I'm not dated. I'm still here.
That's true.
And I'm glad you are too. Definitely.
I was going to say, I love following Marce's footsteps and having Marce and Jean and Angelo and our other supporting organizations as just leaders in what I conceptualize as like ocean justice and just justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And like to have them as like models of, okay, let's push, let's see what we can do, because we have been working, as Marce said, like have been working for a long time to get more justice components into these conferences. And at some point you go like, let's go. So having them as leaders and examples of like what we can do when we really like pull together, build a coalition, and put our minds to it is incredible and has been incredible. So I think moving forward, like we'll hopefully keep this energy up. We're already talking about what are we going to do, what happens after Upwell. Like Ocean Month is now almost a year away, but Ocean Justice is every month. So like, don't worry, we're going to keep doing it. But I think it just really, it reinvigorated like an energy in me personally about the policy after, you get a little disillusioned. I'm not jaded yet, but it comes in waves. So having all this energy, renewed spirit and energy from this conference, and just speaking to all these people and being community with them has been incredible.
And I will say some homework for your listeners here. You too, listener, can help on this. So, I know that you have some fabulous listeners, some cool people listening to you. So, folks, you probably have heard it before, but I will remain remiss and not say it. If you get asked to speak on a panel, ask who else is on the panel. Make sure that you're not, complicit in this sort of thing. Make sure you're not in all male panels. Make sure you're not in all, white panels, exclusive. So just even asking those questions helps kind of move things the right way.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've definitely taken that approach in the past, to make sure that, we it's almost like it's just even new voices. And I think that's what often it ends up being is just new voices, and providing that platform for those voices to be heard. I think that's how I kind of see it. It's not just taking me away from it, because I think a lot of people are like, well, it's my time to shine and this and that, I've been asked. And it's like, well, no, but there's other people that need to hear, that people need to hear from. And I think especially at a conference where everybody knows each other, it's like invite new people, get new people to talk, talk about their experiences. And I think that's extremely important is when we talk about conservation on a global front. And that's a lot of times what those conferences are talking about, right? Or even just like every country seems to be very multicultural these days. And so there's a lot of different cultures and a lot of different perspectives that need to be addressed and that need to be heard. And so I think that's really important. And so now this conference, it goes on, it's very successful as we heard. So what were Marce, what were your favorite moments? Like a couple of favorite moments that you had during that time?
There was just a whole thing happening. Was exciting. I have to say, I cannot speak highly enough of the CAP event people because in my previous life, when I worked in fishing, I worked in logistics. So I am always in awe of, well thought out and executed plan. So I was very excited about that. I was like, oh my God, you mean I don't have to walk people back? uh, so that was really awesome. I think Colette Pichon Battle, hearing her talk always is just such a highlight. It's exciting to just see that commitment. And she's also one of the, co-conveners of the Ocean Justice Forum with us. And just see so many young people there, to see so many, it's funny because I was that 25-year-old at one point, and it's hard to realize that you're not. But it's exciting to see new people and to see like new opportunities, new conversations, and a special like really special moment for me was to see Carlos Ochoa, who is a former Azul team member now at the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, come on stage and talk about his current work. So that was really exciting.
Kat, how about yourself?
Oh man, I had so many great moments. I mean, again, yes, the CAP events team, stellar. Emma and Diane, if you hear this podcast, you're great. And I think there were times during just all the panels just brought like a smile to my face. I was kind of on the side because I was like on the Zoom and making sure things were running right and doing some of the logistic work. But then I would like tune back in and I was like always listening. But then there was sometimes I'd be like, yes, snap, like yes, absolutely, you're so right. And particularly the panel that Angelo had put together on a new wave of ocean climate leadership. And that was just a great, I don't know, it's just something about it, just again, inspiring, like brought me back to life a little bit and seeing the Rising Leader Initiative folks in the room and them being so engaged and asking like incredible questions and just really like, I mean, I'm not that old, I'm 28, but like, it's still like I'm 5 years out of college and I'm like I'm like, oh my God, they're coming up. They're going to help. This is great. We're going to get more people in the room. We're going to get more people into leadership positions. Like I want to see all these people like around the ocean world. And for years to come, the ocean policy space is kind of small. We kind of all know each other in some way or another. So it's like, oh, I'm so excited to see what these people do and like what path leads them where. So that was just like a great panel. Ocean Joy was also fantastic. I mean, Ocean Justice Policy was also great too. But Ocean Joy was one that I really liked too, because it just reminds you that like, yes, ocean policy, very important, very good things, but it's all connected to literally that the things that bring you joy about the ocean, whether it's diving or whatever, like surfing, sailing. I was home from New Jersey originally, so I was visiting my parents a couple weekends ago, and I was like, I'm going to the beach. I can't be here. So I just like went in, and I just like stood in the water, and I was like, this is ocean joy for me right now. Like this is what I needed. I feel so relaxed, so recharged. I'm like, let's go back to DC now. But all in all, like it was really cool to meet all the different panelists and speakers just from all over that. Again, like they're new to me because I haven't met them and I haven't seen them before, a lot of them. And some of them I worked with before, but others I'm like, you've been doing this for how long? Like, why haven't we met yet? Let's like, get a coffee later. Let's do this. And that's like really how the networks are made and how we further ocean policy as a community and as a group. So yeah, those are my couple of my highlights.
Just to be in a room that is not like, you're the only one, right, is such a big deal.
Yeah.
Because, I think that a lot of us have had that experience in the ocean field where you walk in and you're the only one, or the only non-white person, or the only, it is such a, it's so isolating. So it's really exciting. This is really where a lot of it started. Like, where do we get this space where people feel embraced? Right. So it was just exciting to see a room full of like fabulous rock stars from all over, from, it just obviously Colette and Nupa and all the folks that were there. So it was just really, really exciting, so much awesomeness and wonder.
When you look at a conference like that, Kat, you kind of mentioned it. It's, for me, the conference is not only just hearing the information that comes out on the panels or as a presentation. It's the connections, the conversations, the coffees, the beers, the whatever, that's what I love. That's what I love about a conference, and to see those connections being made, maybe collaborations in the future, understanding of, different aspects of conservation from different peoples is always exciting. Was there any of conversations you had either on the panels or off the panels that really resonated with you? Marce, we'll start with you. In terms that really resonated, that you still think about today, being like, oh, that was really cool to hear.
I will say, I won't say that it was cool, but I'm still thinking about this a lot. It was a little bit jarring to have to hear that, or rather, because people still have to deal with that. But like, folks are talking about Black girls diving and how they're still having to deal with the, and these are folks that are, studying underwater robotics and learning culture and languages and doing these fabulous dives up the deep sea, the Red Sea in Egypt and stuff. And when they're talking about this, people ask them, well, what are you actually using to dive? And they're like testing them.
Right.
As they're talking about this. So I literally was just thinking about this like 2 days ago. I was like, holy smokes, like, can we just let people like, and have it exist, like enjoy? Why are we having to like, and it's something that I have felt before. So it's really interesting. And it was kind of jarring to see that still happens, but I see that happening. And that's something that I'm still thinking about, to be honest.
Yeah, that's really disappointing. It's almost like they're not legitimate. So people are always trying to test them to say, are you doing this right? Are you not doing this right? Did you try this? It's almost like you're always the student and everybody else is the supervisor or the mentor, That's the
othering, right? The perpetual outsiderness. So that's something. I don't, I won't let you down. I won't finish this on a down note. But I was just really excited to see that at the same time, these are folks that are starting from 9 years old and they're, doing these fabulous dives in Egypt, that are doing underwater robotics, that are studying at that level. So it's really exciting. And, I hope that people see that is happening, that exists. But yeah, that we stop, so much with the gatekeeping.
Kat, how about yourself? Was there anything that, like, any of the conversations you had or heard that still resonate with you today?
Oh man, yes, definitely. Unfortunately, it is a little bit of a downer too, so I'm sorry. But there were so many good things, so don't worry about that. But one thing that I think Anupa was speaking about was the, like, similar to what Marce was saying about, like, this is your favorite band, name every song that's ever been written by them in order. You're like, that's not what that is. Come on. But the amount of like schooling or like credentials you need to be taken seriously as a person of color in a like policy field. And like, oh, do they have letters after their name? Are they like practicing their PhD? I don't even know if that is a thing, but like, are they using it? Like, what do they have?
Yeah.
And it's like, as a younger person who's like thought about going to grad school and like, do I have to do this? Like, I don't necessarily want to, but like, is that the only way that I can go about? Do I go into debt to get letters after my name so somebody takes me seriously? Like, it's kind of like a whirlwind of like, as a young person, like, what do I do? And so to hear like Anupa name that and talk a little bit about how like she's working to like disrupt that in the hiring processes and in conversation and just generally. And I think the first step to anything is really just like acknowledging that problem exists, because you can't fix a problem if you don't know what it is. And bringing that to light is, I think, one of the first times that I've ever actually heard it said in a public forum like that. Like, you know, you whisper with your friends and you're like, oh man, like what's happening? But like to hear it on stage from somebody who has been working in policy is like very well respected, so good, so smart, and
successful.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh, okay, so everyone has kind of felt this before. Like I'm not alone. And I think that goes to also the benefit of having an all like BIPOC like speaker list. And it was like, okay, cool, like this is a real concern that maybe like I wouldn't have heard on a different panel. So that conversation really stuck with me as somebody who's trying to figure out their lives always. But I think there really is that stigma and that glass ceiling, and like if you don't want to go to grad school, you shouldn't have to, and you can still be very smart and very good at your job and advocating. So that's
people
something
do it every day, right?
Exactly.
And the fact that we need, obviously we need, scientists with scientific training, but we also need, communications folks, we need policy folks, we need education
Marketers.
folks, we need marketing people, we need artists, we need architects, we need everybody, we need more people doing ocean conservation, not less, right? So, obviously certain things are done by certain people, but in general, we need to be opening the doors wide open, not gatekeeping.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting too is both of your answers, and I don't know if I expected, like you were both saying, oh, well, unfortunately it's not like a positive thing, but I feel like a conference like this, a lot of these conversations have to be had and documented and spread around because for people like me who don't get those questions all the time, right? I need to be aware of that because it's not just people of color who have to, who are part of the solution. It's everybody who's part of the solution. But if we don't have these conversations and we don't understand sort of the problems and the challenges that people are facing, well, we're never going to come to a solution. And there may not be a solution right off the bat. I mean, there are solutions, but it may not be implemented right off the bat until we start to see more people of color in these positions where they can start to, support and be with other people and start to collaborate. And so in a positive way, instead of such a negative way. But we don't always have to, like, these conversations don't have to always have solutions. Is that sort of kind of what a lot of the conversations went for, or just more identifying some of the challenges, or were there solutions as well? Do you find?
I think there's a lot of solutions right off the bat. I do think that you need to have those conversations, even if you don't have a solution. I will say right off the bat, one thing, having, again, not jaded, but, experienced, so many people that have left the field because they have these feelings, right? And so even if you have like a couple of people that hear other folks that are dealing with this issue, that are having to deal with, making, very hard financial or educational choices because they feel that they need to do this, even though they're not necessarily called to do this. I know so many people that have left the field because they don't feel like they're fitting in and they're trying to pursue this. So I think that if we can voice that and we can be open about that, then people can make, a more informed choice. And if you, want to pursue more education because you want to pursue more education, then that's fabulous, but not because you're feeling pushed into it.
Yeah, there's like definitely not only one way to get into this kind of work, which I think is often presented as there is only one way, but that's so, it's just not true. And I think it takes a lot of talking to other people in the field that look like you and represent your community and stuff like that. You realize that there are other avenues that aren't like the traditional one, or what people say you should definitely do to get your foot in the door here. I think there are so many ways for people to get involved and to do this work and advocate and do policy work and all that stuff. And if you want to get further education and do a master's and a PhD, you're more than welcome to. but it should not
Absolutely.
be the
Yeah.
only way that you are respected in the
Yeah.
field, which I'm still contending with, still thinking about, but like hopefully,
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
resolved and people just understand the differences in education and the privilege that comes with
Yeah.
that.
And, which is why I keep harping about the fact that I come from fishing. I am this gal from Tijuana. I am not a scientist. I'm not a lawyer yet. I don't know, maybe one day. But I love to read and I love to keep studying. So like, I'm
Hey,
still in
there you
school. I
go.
keep doing this. Yeah. But I'm this gal from Tijuana. I had no idea I was going to do this. Here I am later, working at this, highest level of policy, wrote a report for the UN plastics. I'm not bragging. I'm just, showing, sometimes I
Yeah,
do brag, but
absolutely. Yeah.
showing the whole thing. And it's really exciting because like you can and you must, not just you can, but you must put yourself in this place because we need every single point of view, as many as possible to inform policy so that it can be successful. So
Yeah.
don't worry if you are interested, if you want to do this, if you do whatever it is that you do, you need to participate. You need to be part of this in whatever capacity you can. We need everybody.
It's a powerful message, and I think it's easy to get down, and feel intimidated, and it's not an easy thing to go through for anybody, and it's we also, I feel like in the ocean conservation world we need to support each other more to make sure that people who are feeling down or if you've witnessed this kind of stuff happening, you got to step up for those people, and it's not always on them to step up, right? They already have a hard enough fight as it is, and so I think that's a great way of putting it is just if you think that you can make a difference in a way and you're passionate about it, you just go ahead. And there's people who've done it before and they've kind of paved that path a little bit easier, and hopefully it'll get a little easier every generation. Now Upwell, obviously, there's some great things that came out of it. I feel like you just scratched the surface though, from a conference perspective, from a conversation perspective. Are there any plans to do Upwell? I know it's early. I know you're probably still sort of on a high from the conference. It's been just a little over a month. Are there any sort of plans to do another Upwell next year, or have a similar type of style, or change up the style? I know you talked a little bit about doing things, maybe something a little bit differently. Maybe it's behind the scenes, or who you invite, or whatever that might be. What are the next sort of they anticipate, like what are you planning next, or what's in the future?
Marce, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I full disclosure, I'm technically on sabbatical.
True.
Right.
So that was my last week of work.
Okay.
And so I sort of like I will not say that I haven't checked my email, but for the record, I have not checked my email. So do not email me until I come back in September. But I do know that there is a lot of interest. I do know that there is a lot that this could grow into. I do think that there's a lot of I'm going to be very candid here, hard questions to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And because again, it's not just the who, the when, but the how. And with such a subject, I think that it's very important to also in how this is executed. I think that we had 2 months to do this. So, conversations were not had, whatever. And so I think that we need to be a lot more intentional, but I think that there's definitely a need for this.
Yeah.
And I think that I know that there's been a debrief, which I have not been to. So I'll let Kat talk to that, but I do know that I'm going to be making some calls when I come back in September.
Love it.
Marce, I'm sorry, I forgot that was your last week.
It was my official last week on the books.
Oh,
yeah.
Goodness. Well, it feels like forever ago now. But yeah, so just from a planning perspective and like with the supporting organizations and the host organizations, we like have debriefed, we've talked about it, we've kind of just been noodling on like feedback that we've gotten. We'll be sending out actually a feedback survey to folks who RSVP'd to the events in the next week or so to get some more data points. But
Mm-hmm.
we're really in the beginning stages now that we have like 11 months versus 2 months to really do this well thought out, and takes the steps necessary to include all voices, get all the calls in we need, not really rush it. But I still think that like such a valuable space. I'm so happy that we did it and we're able to pull this off, and that everyone seemed to give very positive feedback, and really enjoy the day. So we'll certainly see. I'm looking forward to Marce making some calls.
Can I propose? I just had this idea that popped up. Can I propose? Obviously, you don't have to take this, but I feel like Upwell could be like the next, like for ocean conservation, like the next TEDx kind of thing, where you have these independent sort of Upwells that happen all over the place. Because Marce, you kind of mentioned earlier, there's like, you have a list of like hundreds of people that would be a perfect fit for any of these conversations. So I almost feel like you could almost do like an Upwell X, where, you know, you have different, you know, you can do it virtually just like you did, just like you can have a virtual component and an in-person component, but it can hit everybody from different parts of the world. So nobody has to worry about traveling to, say, DC. That's or true. Traveling to a certain point. Do you see it kind of evolving into that? Has it ever been thought of something like that?
I can't say that I have gotten that much into detail, but the idea of it being more participative is definitely something that comes to mind. Yes.
Right.
So I haven't gotten that much into detail, but yes, you know, whether it's something that keeps popping up for me is the South by kind of like in you know, in the origination model, that it's like, oh, do people propose things? Because, and again, we don't know what we don't know, and there's so many other people out there. And you know, I'm not speaking. I don't want to propose ideas here until you know we have those conversations in September. Yeah. But yes, like in general, more participation and input, I think is the name of the game. And you know, you can never go wrong there.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole name of the game, right? Is to get more voices and stuff. That's what he's talked about more and more and more. Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to seeing what the next iteration is going to look like. And I'm glad, Marce, you're able to enjoy yourself on sabbatical and relax after, you know, ending on such a great note, you know, right before a week. That must have been awesome, and just also exhausting at the same time, you know, and being able to digest that. But I want to thank both of you for coming on the podcast. I love having these conversations. It's a conversation that I continue to learn from, and I'm glad that we're able to kind of have my audience to be able to listen to this, and you know, it is a great audience and they like to engage. So I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments from people who are like, this is kind of cool. Like I want to know more and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to put links to in the show notes to the YouTube video that's out there, so that people can still watch, because you can still watch the conference. It's, you know, you all need to just press play, and you can even take it in short chunks and stuff and digest what's been said. But I'm gonna do that as well. And of course, you're both welcome to come back on to discuss the next iteration and to kind of promote the conference, because I would really love to see this kind of just increase in the number of people that are able to participate and be able to watch and all that kind of stuff. So I want to thank you both for not only the work that you're doing, but for coming on here and sharing that with us. It's been a real pleasure to meet both of you and to have both of you on the show to share your stories. It's been great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Marce, and thank you, Kat, for joining us on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Also, thank you for the work that you've put in, along with your colleagues, to make Upwell happen. I think it's really important that we have these types of conferences, but also include more people who need to be heard within the traditional conferences that we have now, the existing conferences, the conferences that have been around for, you know, decades, and have those voices heard in those conferences. Marce made a very good point in that when people are asked to be part of the panel and that are, you know, traditionally seen or even heard on panels, maybe they should say, well, who else is on the panel? And maybe other people, and maybe suggest other people that can contribute to those panels, new information and information from their perspective. I think it's really important that we start to include people that are not traditionally heard and that should be heard, or that people would find of value to be heard. And I think it's really important also to have the names of people in your back pocket to give to people, to say, hey, have you considered putting this person or this set of people on the podcast or on a podcast, or even on a panel to be heard, because it's important for their voices to get out and they can provide a lot of value. And this is why I think they can provide a lot of value to that panel. I think it's important. I think we need to support each other. Marce and Kat both suggested that in the podcast. Support each other. This is a massive problem that we're facing, that the oceans are facing. We need to do it together. We need to do it by bringing each other up, not knocking each other down. And we've seen it time and time again, people knocking each other down to get in front of cameras, to get on panels, to do that. And it's got to stop. It's all about the ocean. It should always be about the ocean. It's about making sure that the voices are representative of the world, and that of the different parts of the world that are seeing these ocean issues come up and that are going through these ocean issues and that need to be heard. And I think that's a really important message from Upwell, from this conference, and also from Marce and from Kat. And I think it's important that we go forward with that message and start to continue to support each other in this this large field of marine science and conservation, to be able to say, hey, you know what? We need to do this together, not individually, not to get the most funding, not to get, to make sure my job is good. We need to do it for the ocean. That's something that's really important. That's something we need to continue and we need to move forward by doing. So we're going to follow more of this from Upwell. And I hope if you have any questions or anything like that, please go to the show notes. I'm going to put links to videos and all the information that you need for the Upwell, for Azul, for the Center of American Progress, and a lot of other links that I can find that will be put in there. But also, if you have any questions for me, you can get a hold of me through Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean, at How to Protect the Ocean, all one word. I want to thank Marce. I want to thank Kat. I want to thank all the organizers and people who contributed to not only this podcast, but to Upwell, people from Azul, people from CAP, and all the other organizations, the Ocean Justice Committee. I think it's really important that everybody takes part, and I hope to be at the conference next year to be able to, be a part of these conversations or listen to these conversations, and we get to meet new people that you don't normally hear from, and maybe even have them on this podcast. So, thank you so much for listening to this episode of How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.